Uh, there we go.
Okay, all right. So good evening and welcome everyone to the Ad Hoc Sustainability and Resilience Committee meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order officially at 6:03. And let's take a quick roll call. Council members that are present. Dunn, Shanahan, Smith. And so we have a quorum moving on. So approval of the minutes from February 14th. To have a motion for the approval of the minutes. Thank you, Councilman Shanahan. And public participation. Katie, do you have anyone online that would like to speak?
I think you have to actually take a vote on the minutes, right?
Do we have to take?
You just made a motion to vote.
All right, so let's take a vote. All those in favor? 2 abstentions. Okay, minutes are accepted. So I guess now we can move on to public participation.
We have one hand raised.
Perfect. Okay. So just a quick reminder, you have 3 minutes to speak on an item directly on the agenda. State your full name, address, and then you can proceed with your public comments.
Thank you. My name is Linnell Jones. I moved to Norwalk in 1986. My address is 10 Point Road. My husband and I also owned 8 Point Road and 2.5 Nathan Hale Drive. I have firsthand knowledge of drainage, pollution, and permitting on Nathan Hale Drive. This is a private road and a private association in the coastal flood zone and is also the address of the Norwalk Yacht Club. For 40 years, I've watched drainage on Nathan Hale Drive, seeing the importance of the abandoned road end, the tidal swale between 2 and 2.5 Nathan Hale, the lowest point of the road, farthest from the open water, and important for drainage from the tidal pond across the street, which also drains many of the lawns. When this area drains, floods not only in every high tide, but certainly in storms. When the Wilson Point,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you have any comments directly? That's something that's actually on the agenda, whether it's the.
Yes, sir, I do. And if you could give me another minute, okay, I know you've read my emails. And this is about enforcement. It's also about public education and knowledge. Please, I can see you're shaking your head, Lisa, but I think I have the right to say something.
Right,
When the Wilson,
It's an agenda item, Ms. Jones?
the agenda item is, you can shake your head all you want, Lisa, but I live in a neighborhood where we have pages of rules and
Ms.
no
Jones,
pages. I think it's a little bit rude, Chairman Lopez, to not let me speak. We've been through this before. You can
Ms.
say
Jones, I'm gonna give you 2 additional minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. When the Wilson Point Board, using association funds, added hundreds of feet of new drainage from fertilized lawns, new catch basins, and allowed the filling of the tidal wetland swale and 2 new point source outflows with no review, no permits, no best practices, I questioned and still question, as you know from my February 27th email. My presentations are listed. Many of my neighbors still believe no permits are required in coastal flood zones. Last February, DEEP issued the Norwalk Yacht Club a NOV for having the wrong permit and required.
Can I discuss something that's clearly on the item? If not, we have to remove you.
Let me ask you this: does Norwalk?
Okay, Katie, you can go ahead.
One question,
Katie, you can
sir,
go ahead and remove Ms.
according
Jones.
to our POCD, we should have a sustainability director. Do we have one? And I'll just leave it at that. Okay, I've read the POCD.
Next, do we have anyone else that would like to speak?
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, perfect. That closes our public participation part. Next item on the agenda is the presentation by our consultant SLR on the Climate Action Plan.
Great. I'll introduce if that's okay,
Perfect.
Chairman.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, good deal. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight's a pretty exciting night. We're finally bringing to you the draft sustainability and resiliency plan we've been working on for the greater part of a year here, a little bit over. Really excited to introduce SLR. They're our consultant on the project. I'm just kind of providing you some context. As we talked in past meetings, the sustainability and resiliency plan is really to set a foundation in some senses for all the work that you are all, doing as part of this group, and providing a framework for which to, develop the plans and action and recommendations further that you're going to hear tonight. But really what we did when we set out to develop the plan was to take a look at what's existing. There's been a lot of great work that's already been done in the city, from the natural hazard mitigation plan, also the plan of conservation and development. So what we engaged our consultant to do was to take a look at those efforts, use their expertise to identify any gaps that may exist based on their technical skills and knowledge, and then make recommendations and formulate all of that into a list of goals and actionable projects. So the universe of things that you could do with this is wide. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could approach sustainability. I think that what this sets to do is to just create a framework so when you'll hear some of the administrative recommendations to have an office of sustainability in the city, this is really to help them have a guidebook in terms of where they should pick up, how they should start working with you all. And really this is, although it's a completion to a plan, it's really the start of a journey for all of you to help, work together on, to help navigate and to help move these projects forward. And we're, obviously here in the technical capacity that we've always been. But that's sort of the high level, and I'll give it over to Noah Slovin, who's joining us from SLR, who will provide more detail in terms of what the plan's actual outcomes have been.
Thanks. Thank you, Brian. Sorry, I had trouble finding the mute button. Thanks for that great introduction, Brian. You really covered some of the kind of front material of the slides that I was going to do, so I'll probably skip through those pretty quickly. This was, as Brian said, over a year-long project, a lot that we could talk about, and I want us to kind of get through to talking about some of the specific recommendations, including those regarding the administrative structure for Norwalk. The agenda of what I will kind of run through relatively quickly just parallels the structure of the plan itself. So we start with an introduction, explaining why we're doing this, a little bit of background, the process of developing this sustainability and resilience plan, the SRP, some of our findings, including from the gap analysis, and then again, the kind of action roadmap, and some administrative recommendations. So just to look very big picture, this is the sustainability and resilience plan. So we're thinking both about the emissions of Norwalk, the resource use of Norwalk, and trying to make that more sustainable and make Norwalk resilient to the impacts of climate change. And I'm really not going to get into the details here. This is summarized in the document itself, but the two key issues that we're thinking about with climate change are extreme heat and heat waves, increasing annual precipitation, increasing, I should have said 3, and of course, sea level rise, increasing coastal flooding. And this is kind of a side plug for a great resource available from CIRCA, the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, which this is also kind of referenced in the document, that provides a great resource that incorporates physical, natural, and social metrics to comprehensively analyze vulnerability statewide. And it really allows you to evaluate the intersection between climate hazards and social vulnerability, which we know is a specific concern for Norwalk. And to that end, we did work to center equity throughout this plan. There is one specific goal addressing environmental justice and equity, but it's really incorporated throughout all of the actions, and many of the actions really have other direct connections to equity and environmental justice. And there is a section towards the end of the plan in the implementation roadmap that presents some specific ideas for ways to incorporate equity into specific actions, but also into the overall administrative structure that we recommend. Brian already explained well the objectives of the plan, so I'm actually just going to skip right over this slide and talk about the process that we took to get there. So we started by reviewing existing documents and plans and kind of parallel efforts that were ongoing at the same time that we were working on this project. And we conducted engagement with municipal staff, other kind of non-government stakeholders and partners, and a public engagement session. We took the information that we gathered there and used it to consolidate those actions and develop a consolidated list and an organized list of actions organized into different opportunities and goals. Caramita, our partner, also conducted a greenhouse gas inventory at a parallel effort that was incorporated into this document. And then all of that led to implementation planning in two major forms. One is an implementation roadmap that identifies a suite of, as Brian said, goals, objectives to achieve those goals, and then specific actions to kind of step-by-step achieve each objective, as well as some recommendations for administrative and operational changes that will help Norwalk to sustain the outcomes of this project so that you can continue to build resilience and build sustainability moving forward. We reviewed 15 plans and studies spanning a variety of different topics and approaches to sustainability and resilience, many of which were not really specifically sustainability and resilience plans or projects, but that address in various ways relevant topics so that we could gather this list of over 100 different actions that we then kind of refined, consolidated, and organized. And then we added on to that information, the information that we gathered through our engagement activities, including a kickoff meeting, 3 focus groups where we delved down into more depth with specific stakeholders, public meeting that 29 community members participated in, and then a municipal workshop where we took the top, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, the top 4 or 5 objectives and really dug into the specific steps that would be needed to turn those objectives from an idea into reality on the ground. The plan includes a summary of the different findings that came from the research and review of existing plans and community engagement. It includes our understanding of 10 top sustainability and resilience priorities in Norwalk, including some of the key hazards of concern, urban heat, flooding, coastal flooding, and stormwater flooding. Some key goals and priorities, including improving access to open space and waterfront access in particular, restoring coastal habitats, and then other goals, promoting environmental justice, as mentioned, conducting education and engagement with the public, but also with municipal staff to help everyone understand climate change better, and continuing to have a growing economy and a growing population through development, focusing on infill, redevelopment, and transit-oriented development, and using zoning to protect areas from flood risk and make sure that development occurs in a way that is that promotes resilience and sustainability. So based on our understanding of these priorities and our review of past documents and existing information, we developed a gap analysis that identified 7 kind of key categories of different types of gaps in plans, projects, and administrative capacity. And the document describes the status of each of these gaps, what Norwalk has already done related to each topic, and some potential strategies to promote ongoing efforts and to advance initiatives that address those identified gaps. So that gap analysis produced some additional actions that were taken into the final list of actions to advance resilience and sustainability. So that final list consists of both actions identified from previous plans and documents, consolidated and refined, and some new actions based on this gap analysis. I'm gonna just apologize before going very quickly here, I want to make sure that we get through everything and have time for a Q&A, and I can feel myself talking quickly, so I apologize for that. Keramita conducted a greenhouse gas inventory. I'm not going to go into detail on this right now, but Nick McCreary is here from Keramita, so during the Q&A, if you have specific questions about this, he should be able to answer those. But basically looking at municipal activities and municipal assets and how greenhouse gas is produced from those in order to help us understand and to help you understand how you can then reduce greenhouse gas emissions in each of those different sectors. So looking at stationary energy, those are basically energy produced from buildings, 54% residential buildings, 42% are from commercial and industrial buildings. There's also emissions from transportation, and you can see the roadway transportation that's being produced in the city, and then waste. And the dominant sources of emissions are stationary energy, buildings, and transportation, cars, buses, trucks, and so on. So Keramita developed a pathway to net zero for Norwalk based on this baseline information and the way to achieve this net zero by 2050 goal. And you can see how some of the actions that are identified in this plan, they calculated or estimated the greenhouse gas reduction benefits of the specific actions and them being implemented over the next decades and where that would leave the city in terms of its reduction in emissions, and then highlight the remaining emissions that would still need to be addressed. Just very generally, sorry, I don't have the percentage right in front of me. I'm gonna continue and we can come back to this and maybe I'll have Nick talk more about it at the end. So this all leads to the taking action section of the SRP, which is the structured implementation roadmap for the city. So again, we consolidated all of the actions from previous plans, organized them, and actions based on the gap analysis, organized them into a series of goals, objectives to achieve those goals, and then specific actions to achieve, to advance those objectives. And they're presented as a series of tables to really help visualize the activities that need to happen. So this is just an example. Goal number 2 is for the city to reduce its municipal greenhouse gas emissions. Objective 2.2 feeds into that goal, electrifying the municipal fleet. And then those are ordered. So this is the second objective of that goal. And then there are actions that are a step-by-step set of actions to be taken to implement that objective. And we assigned timelines, estimated timelines to achieve each of those actions. Also in this table are high-level preliminary cost ranges of what it would take to implement each action, a lead department or committee or individual within the city's organizational structure that is responsible for initiating and leading the listed action. Although we recognize that most, or if not all of these actions would require collaboration and coordination between different departments, and we'll get to that. And then we have a table of relevant criteria. So these show how each action contributes to different sustainability and climate resilience goals and objectives, and also can help understand how each action aligns with different grant opportunities, which I'll show how that can be done in 2 slides. So I have a more detailed set of slides with all of these different goals, but again, for the sake of time, to make sure that we can have some time for Q&A, I'm just going to summarize the 8 goals here, and then if you have specific questions, I can pull up those slides afterwards. But the goals are: one, administrative and operational capacity. This is to revisit Norwalk's administrative structure and standard operating procedures to facilitate coordination and to integrate sustainability and climate resilience goals throughout city operations. Goal number 2 is to better understand the primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions, identify greenhouse gas reduction strategies, and set citywide reduction goals. Number 3 is to promote equitable resilient solutions, such as conducting meaningful and inclusive engagement, understanding the unique vulnerabilities and risks of marginalized groups, prioritizing projects for underserved populations and neighborhoods, and considering secondary impacts of actions that may negatively impact those populations. Number 4, economic resilience is really focused on creating a resilient local business community that can withstand various climate challenges and help support sustainability efforts. Number 5 is to use green infrastructure and nature-based solutions to reduce risks from hazards and promote co-benefits to water and air quality, habitat restoration, and social and economic conditions. Number 6 is to advance long-term resilience and sustained operations of critical infrastructure, such as municipal facilities, power, water, and wastewater utilities. Number 7 is to incorporate resilience and sustainability strategies into the transportation network. And number 8 is to engage community stakeholders, partners, and the community about climate resilience initiatives. The list of goals, objectives, and actions is followed by a list of grant opportunities. This is a small selection just to show what that looks like in the plan. And those grant opportunities have the same relevant criteria columns as the specific actions do. So as different grant opportunities come up, you can look across, what are the different goals of that grant opportunity, and how do they align with the different goals and criteria for each of those specific actions. So you can see if there's a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Coastal Resilience Fund is really looking at flooding, equity, nature-based solutions, infrastructure, and so on. You can see which actions might fit that grant based on those criteria. Similarly, you can go the other way. If you have specific actions, you can look at which grant is most appropriate by comparing those columns. So that's the implementation roadmap. We then follow that up with some specific administrative recommendations. And those are really fourfold. So first, we recommend establishing a sustainability and resilience office that reports to the chief of staff. And then the sustainability and resilience officer leading that office will then take on responsibility for these other actions, these other recommendations, which include developing a sustainability and resilience vision and goals through a robust public campaign, establishing a permanent sustainability and resilience committee. That's you all, instead of an ad hoc one, having that become a permanent committee. And then also creating an interdepartmental sustainability and resilience work group, which would not be a formal committee, but would pull together leaders from all the different departments and have them work together on a regular basis to coordinate on projects that are relevant to sustainability and resilience. So if you're a visual thinker, this is a current version of Norwalk's administrative structure, although it has been pointed out that there are some things, it's an abridged version of that. And let's see if I can make this work. Okay, so there would be a sustainability and resilience committee that's outside the formal structure of municipal staff. They would work with the sustainability and resilience officer and help inform the decisions made by that individual. And then the interdepartmental sustainability and resilience work group will pull from all these different departments and have them work together with the SRO sitting on that, leading that work group and sitting on that committee. So that's my rapid overview. I have additional slides. Again, if you have any questions about specific specific goals or objectives, I'm happy to dive into those. But I think I managed to leave a few minutes for questions.
Noah, thank you so much for this informative PowerPoint presentation. I mean, just to kind of provide just people who are kind of new to this context. There are cities, a lot of cities across the state, across the country, and most of the world are struggling with, grappling with the negative climatic impact on socioeconomic development. And so Norwalk has been incorporating a lot of these sustainable development principles outlined by the UN, by the World Bank, into its planning endeavors. So this map, this overall framework provides us with a very good assessment as to where we are, and it's going to help inform essentially how to optimize financing to really be able to achieve a lot of these objectives. So thank you very much. So with that, open up the questions. I'll start off with my first question. My first question, though, was like in the area of administrative and in operational capacity, what were like some of the most significant or binding constraints that you found?
Oh, I'm already unmuted. What are the most significant constraints that I found?
Some of the most, yes. That's an idea.
Things that came up were challenges with enforcement, with I guess more broadly even than that is just kind of capacity, just having the time, capacity, and knowledge to, for example, effectively review a development proposal to understand its resilience and sustainability implications and how it aligns with different regulations. And I know at one of our focus group meetings, someone was saying that, having the time to effectively conduct that review was a challenge. That just stands out to me. And I think that, one of the things that we were trying to do is to through our recommended restructuring is to help create a more kind of consolidated, directed understanding of what are our sustainability and resilience goals and objectives, so that we can, more effectively review things like that.
Johan, if I could just piggyback off that, just because, we were pretty intimately involved on the administrative front for sure with Noah's work. One of the things I think it is, we created a plan with over 100 plus projects or recommendations. So you could probably go as big as you want, or, with the staff and throw a bunch of resources at it. But, we have to operate with what's reasonably expected within the city context and making sure that it's right size for Norwalk. So I think the administrative recommendations that have been put forth really try to integrate sustainability into the fabric of every department. So it's not like you're just hiring one. If you only can hire a couple people, you want to make sure that they have the widest reach and widest effect. So what we're saying is that this interdepartmental working group is going to make sure, or is going to work to help that conversation be continued across the board, across every department, because sustainability shouldn't just be a silo in and of itself, just kind of trying to move things forward. But I think in terms of a constraint to ask your question, I think it's just how do we work within the existing structure of and make the most of the resources that are planned to be allocated towards this. And I think that's what this structure that's being put forth is trying to do, is to kind of just optimize that, build sustainability into the workflow of every department so that you're getting more bang for your buck across the way. And then have some sort of, transparency and reporting mechanism, obviously working to you all or reporting to you all and helping that, it's going to be a whole team effort along the way trying to get this done. And this really sets the foundation for, the what as opposed, and some of the how. Hope that helps.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. Councilmember Goldstein, do you have a question?
Sorry, I had a moment there trying to figure out mute, and I don't know why Zoom's not letting me turn the camera on my phone. However, I think look, I mean, we've been waiting for this for a very long time, and I'm so glad that it's here. And I agree wholeheartedly with the making sure that this is not just a part of our government, but that it is built into everything that we do, that it's just part of the evaluation process. And I think that's going to take some doing. both from an efficiency standpoint, but also to make sure that, you know, the ship of state is moving in this direction. And I wonder, first of all, your thoughts about the retraining and the kind of efforts that are going to happen to reorient our municipal and, you know, our municipal workforce to be thinking about these kind of issues, both planning, organization, execution, and use of resources. I also think that, and I'm just sort of making a comment here, and you can respond to sort of what you want. I do think that for as much as you know, we need to be thinking about municipal infrastructure and how we are rethinking a lot of these, you know, sort of conservation and efficiency standards. I also think we're going to have to work with the private sector, private business, to make these changes with them too. And they're really that this plan doesn't really speak to that. And I realize this is more about the municipal front, but I do wonder how we can, you know, work with private business and non-municipal actors to get everyone moving in the same direction.
Yeah, and I could jump on that one too, if that's all right. So I think, you know, Josh, to your first question in terms of retraining or things to get it integrated, I mean, one of the most amazing things about this study is the answers, you know, were lying within the department heads. People are already thinking this, at least at the top for sure. And throughout, you know, the conversations that we had, these solutions and recommendations didn't come from, you know, just out of thin air. They came from discussions with the municipal staff. So I think there's a good culture of that already. People are thinking about this. I think where the rubber meets the road is how do we use this plan and these recommendations to influence investment and capital spending? And I think that's where it's going to come down to, you know, the biggest bang for your buck when we start taking sustainability and looking at, you know, everything through the lens of that as you're making investment recommendations or, you know, whatever you're doing in the budgetary processes to empower people at the municipal, you know, at the administrative level to do these things. I think there's, you know, to your point, I mean, there is definitely need for capacity building always. And I think that's part of the education and engagement component of this plan. So I think it's still going to need to be a part of it at the staff level. But I can't emphasize enough, you know, we could come up with the best plan in the world, but without implementation, it's not going to, you know, move the needle in terms of a sustainability perspective. And then your second question, private public involvement, absolutely. You know, I've already been working through some ideas of if we could just be really pointed in what we need and identify, you know, we're presenting you a universe of potential projects. I think what the next step needs to be is prioritizing them and figuring out how we go about funding them, whether it's from state, federal, or private resources. And I think that's the role of the new sustainability officer, obviously with us helping as needed. But I think that's really a key next step, but your point's well taken.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And look, I think we're all moving toward the same direction. It's just a matter of figuring out how to best get there. And this plan is going to be a really valuable resource in doing just that. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Councilman Goldstein. Councilman Majewski-Einer, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Actually had a couple quick questions. One, to the point that you're making, Brian, about collaboration, I did note that the plan refers a number of times to the Parks Master Plan, but without a lot of specifics. And it seems like, I just wanted to double check that you know, that NOAA or folks had the opportunity to review that plan, or that I just want to make sure that we are syncing there, since those two things were, I recognize, were being developed on parallel tracks.
Yeah, I'll let Noah take over in terms of what involvement he had, and I can fill in from there.
I honestly, I'd have to go back and look at the list of different plans that we reviewed. But we were reviewing both existing kind of completed adopted plans to extract specific recommendations, and then for different kind of parallel ongoing projects, we reviewed to understand what was being done in order to help us understand for the priorities and gap analysis portion of what we were doing, and then, you know, worked to engage the municipal staff and stakeholders while we were developing, again, our understanding of gaps, objective priorities, and help inform ultimately our list of actions. So, you know, I know that we did interact with that planning process to some degree. I don't recall off the top of my head what exactly we reviewed for that.
Yeah, I think it was challenging, obviously, because it was a parallel sort of process at some points, but we were making sure Robert Stowers was involved along the way. So I think he's integrated in that. And I think that the sustainability officer needs to, moving forward, that's part of the discussion by having these interdepartmental working groups. So whatever the ultimate plan recommendations are, those are being considered within this context.
Okay, thank you, because I think there's obvious overlaps. So, and then my other question was sort of, I appreciated the kind of, it was nice to have a number for the carbon kind of footprint of the city at the end. But in a vacuum, I don't know how helpful that is. Is there any ability to say, are we high, medium, or low? Are we standard for a city of our size? Is there any evidence that the fact that we've been making efforts all along mean that we're, sort of in a good position to start on this journey? Without context, it's a little hard to evaluate the meaning of that number.
Is anyone from Caramita on in terms of that? I have my thoughts, but I was going to open it up.
Yeah, Nick is coming on.
Yeah, hi, Brian, Noah, council members. My name is Nick McCrary. I work with Caramita, and we covered the greenhouse gas inventory portion in addition to a few other pieces of the plan. And to address your question, I think I hear you asking, how do your emissions look relative to some other communities of similar size or region?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say off the top of my head, you're right in par or blah, 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 but what I can comment on is that the proportion of emissions coming from stationary energy versus transportation is fairly typical for a community where we're going to see those are going to be quite a bit higher because that's where most of the greenhouse gas emissions are emitted from. But we could certainly take a look at some of the other work that we've done to see how your emissions would compare to a similar community. We can use the Climate View software that we use to do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful if you don't mind, just because it inspires people in all directions to kind of have some sense of where we stand. And Brian, you said you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the benefit that I see personally for the GHG, we could obviously do this comparison because I think it's always valuable, has always been benchmarking. And I think with the Climate View software, we've already taken a look at the impact the plan recommendations are going to have on GHG, but that obviously doesn't get us there. So I think what it is as we develop things and prioritize certain actions or, look at the different plans that come out, we want to be able to monitor this, along the way. What we're planning to do with all of our plans is try to create the central repository for performance monitoring. And that's what's going to be the most valuable part from my perspective of having the GHG. Carbon and greenhouse gas, it's a very global problem. So how much, value are you getting from, you're getting the most refined number at the Norwalk scale? I think it's more it's more aspirational and it's more performance monitoring driven. And from my perspective, those are my basic thoughts in that regard.
And I get that. And I like the ability of sort of, again, with our limited capital funds to be able to evaluate things in terms of a context of this will be more effective in reducing our greenhouse gases versus another. But I do think that, from a constituent facing, it is an obvious question, kind of like, well, or where are we starting from, gives us some sense of, and again, because it can be motivational in terms of we're in good shape, so let's crush it, or like we're far behind, we better catch up. Like any of those things can be very human motivators that would be helpful to understand. So
absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, and also I'm just thinking, the categories too. So obviously you heard those transportation and buildings, so that's obviously a big target area to start hitting.
Councilmember Shanahan?
I was just going to go right to the same place that Nora went, which was the benchmarking, especially with the GHGs, because that's one of the things that we really want to focus on. And I think that it is something that's, kind of low hanging fruit, something that people understand, and people always kind of want to do better. So that was where my question was going to go, but Nora got there first. So instead, what I'll say is thank you very much. We've been working on this for, I think it's almost 2 years now, Brian, and it's so great to see that we are finally at a place where we have something to read, something to benchmark, and something to aspire to. So thank you to the whole team for doing this really hard work. And we're looking forward to setting those benchmarks and crushing them, as Nora says.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Brian, quick follow-up. Just based on your assessment, do you have any idea how can the city actually incorporate some of these actually incorporate climate planning into its budgetary process?
Yeah, I think that's something I'd like to follow up on and give a little more
Okay.
detailed thought to, because I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. One of the things that I've seen, even within the context of sustainability and equity, is you could develop index tools that you could effectively evaluate individual projects on. So you set a certain level of criteria that makes sense to either this group or whatever that is.
Right.
And then you run your capital budget or operating budget, whatever it is, through that, and you can generate effectively a score. And then you could evaluate things within that context. So that's one of the concepts that I've been looking at. But I think I think what would be interesting for the next coming months is to bring ideas to you all that we could talk out, and you could, figure out what the next best steps are in that regard.
Excellent. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Dunn?
Hi, I just had a question. In the PowerPoint or whatever it is, I was wondering who the stakeholders were. You had a couple dozen stakeholders and then a couple dozen community members involved. Where did you pull them from primarily? I guess my concern is going forward, how we engage more people in this process, if that's really who we have to kind of lean on for engagement. We need to increase that, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think, as when we first set off on this, it was a strategic decision was made to kind of do an internally focused sort of plan, just because so much work had been done with the natural hazard mitigation plan and the plan of conservation and development in terms of generalized public outreach, recognizing that those recommendations and that public feedback would still carry forward. But we did do public outreach. We had a general public meeting that went out, to whoever was interested in attending. But internally, we made sure that we involved community groups, city staff, city operations, city finance, also doing focus groups with people in various service organizations, nonprofits. And we tried to kind of give a really targeted outreach to kind of fill in those gaps that might have been present in the planning stage or POCD or the larger public outreach. And the idea being that now that we have all these recommendations, not only do you have a bunch of projects, you have a lot of opportunities for further engagement. And I think that's going to be much more public facing. And that was the sort of idea, the thought that I always thought, you got to put your oxygen mask on before assisting others. And I think that's what this was a step forward in terms of the administrative structure of the city, to enable further engagement and to cast a wider net and to try to, I think, along the lines of what, as I understand your comments.
Now, it sounds like you did a lot of work trying to do outreach, but in a city of close to 100,000 people, only getting, especially if you're meeting with community groups and focus groups at all, only getting, 20, 30 people there doesn't sound like a good return on your investment of time. And how can we increase that, I guess, would be my thing.
Yeah, I think one thing that we're looking at too next is the next step is some survey work, for people that may not be able to take a meeting or come. And then tying that in, we've had a good success with the housing work that we've been doing to get more people out to these meetings. So I think, postcards, mailers, more direct marketing, once we sort of define which projects you all want to push.
Is something more successful than something else? Like what's your
Surveys seem to be pretty successful. We had a 600 respondent.
through email or social media? How are you?
So we basically do email, social media, postcards, seat drops on the bus. That's what we did for the housing and development survey. And that's what I plan to do for the sustainability work.
Okay, so there's no sense of like one's a better vehicle than the other for getting there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the venue and in the topic is what I've noticed.
Okay. All right.
Brian, quick question. Have you guys given any thought to, setting up possible impact evaluations going forward? And let's say if there's a new project, kind of, we want to consider what the outcome looks like potentially. Either it's just, just your standard, whether it's econometric work, just to kind of get a sense of, to be able to measure and kind of see what worked, what didn't work so well. And then going forward, what can we actually do to improve the next project coming down the pipe?
No, I think that's a great idea. That's not obviously included as a recommendation, but these are the kind of things that we should be talking about. And I think that, if it's possible, in addition to what we're talking about moving forward, is to to prioritize these things now in terms of what you think are the most important things so that we can build strategy like you're talking about around those specific topics and make them sensitive to that so we could try to, hit the ground running now that you have this plan in hand.
That's good. Thank you so much, Brian. Does anyone else have any questions? Go once, going twice. No? All right. Well, I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Noah, for your presentation. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Brian, of course. Thank you, everyone else, for this very informative presentation. We're very excited. We're ready to get started. So, yeah. So thank you so much again, guys.
Thank you. And I
Thank
apologize.
you.
I have to jump off and go to BET now. So I'll see you guys later.
No worries.
Take
We
care.
get it. We get it.
Johan,
Thanks.
Thank
say
you.
we're off Parks and Rec, right?
What's that? Yes, that's right. Parks and Rec at
Right.
7 o'clock. Yep. I know. All right. So we can move on to the next item on the agenda. And today we have with us Sarah Cruz, who's going to introduce herself and kind of speak a little bit about her role. And yeah, so over to you, Sarah.
Thank you guys for inviting me. So just a quick introduction. So I joined the Recreation and Parks Division in December. I was hired as the arborist / horticulturalist for parks. So some of my background, I'm a licensed arborist. I have a degree in conservation biology, and I've been working in the field of urban forestry for about 6 years, primarily in the tri-state area. So a big part of my job is to ensure that we're using best management practices in anything tree related across department, citywide, and that our standards, our maintenance protocols, and our policies are in the best interest of our tree canopy, and also just the health of our urban forest. And so, as most people here would agree, trees are a very integral part of sustainability, primarily because of the ecosystem services that they provide. So whether that's sequestering carbon, intercepting pollutants, lowering the urban heat island effect in urban areas. So long-term, the more that we can preserve our canopy and add to it, we'll be reaping the benefits in terms of ecosystem services. I apologize, I'm just getting over a really bad cold. So just as an update on our major project in terms of trees in Norwalk, our tree master plan is underway. And that plan will provide recommendations on how to best manage our canopy. It will include things like tree planting standards. We'll be setting some canopy goals for the city. And the consultant has done really extensive benchmarking for us, both nationwide and within the state of Connecticut. They'll also provide some recommendations for our policies, our ordinances, to ensure that we're doing the best we can to preserve our trees and also to promote their benefits and their importance in the city. So I'm excited to be in this role, and I'm happy to help in any way for any of the sustainability initiatives. I know most people have to hop off soon, so I'll keep it brief to that.
No, Sarah, thank you so much. We're happy to have you. You seem very passionate about this, so it fits perfectly in the mold. So we're very excited. Does anyone have any questions for Sarah? No. All right. Well, Sarah, thank you. Oh, actually,
I don't have a question for Sarah, but I just want to
Sure.
welcome her to the city and tell her how long we have waited for her role to be filled. And we're delighted that it's filled by her with her wonderful credentials. And as she will tell you, we've already been working really closely together on a grant for the city. So I think she was really sitting in her desk chair for a day or two before we started piling up her desk full of projects to do. So anyways, we're so glad you're here, and we're excited to, start to reap the benefits of the trees, as you say.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Councilman Shanahan. And so, okay, I can tell that pretty much concludes our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Councilmember Shanahan. All right, so that concludes. We'll see everyone next time. And thank you so much for being present.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thanks. Bye.